First off, I want to thank the brave men and women who work behind the wall. I want to thank them on a national level because their job goes unrecognized.
How do they try to turn a guard?
Well, correctional officer. Sorry, I apologize. But correctional officer. How you guys doing today? It's Anthony Gangi, host of Tier Talk. Today I want to touch on briefly problematic employees. This is a tough topic because there's really not a universal answer to dealing with a problematic employee, because every problematic employee could have a different concern, could handle situations differently. So this conversation we're going to have today is just my opinion. I would love to hear yours. Love to hear how you deal with problematic employees. But this is from a supervisor's perspective. This is a supervisor looking down and having to deal with an employee that's just either disgruntled, maybe they challenge the person's authority that's in the higher position, whatever the reason is, but it's an employee that's really killing the morale. So what should a supervisor do? I'm going to give some advice. Hopefully you guys complement this advice, and together we'll get a nice roundabout discussion. And that's key. That's why we have this channel. But I'm sure a lot of us deal with problematic employees. And again, I'm talking from a supervisor perspective, but problematic employees could be a problem at any level, from any perspective. But I'm just talking about the person that's in a position to maybe have to deal with it and correct it. That's the key. Deal with it and be the one to correct it. So it's going to be a good discussion. Now, guys, when we come back from our sponsors, we're going to be talking about problematic employees. So if you haven't, for Tier Talk, please subscribe, interact, engage, comment, hit that bell. That bell's going to notify you every time I post up a video. I stand by for our sponsor.
I wanted to attend a university that had an intelligence program. I wanted to look at problems different. I wanted to increase my critical thinking abilities. AMU offered those avenues to expand. Obtaining your degree as an adult, you're actually paying yourself and investing in yourself. You can't put a dollar on it, it's priceless. It's something that can never be taken away from you.
American Military University. Learn from the leader.
Thank you guys for listening to our sponsor. You know, guys, when it comes to problematic employees, real quick, whether you're a peer or a supervisor, you can't avoid the employee. You guys got to understand that. You cannot avoid the employee because avoidance leads to isolation. Inmates are going to see that. It just sets up the perfect groundwork for manipulation. So remember that, guys. If you have a problematic employee, you need to find a way to interact with that employee. Do not avoid that employee because it just sets up the perfect groundwork. And again, the groundwork has been set up by us. The employee that's problematic and the supervisor or the peers that just said, we're not going to deal with this employee. And that just opens up inmates to kind of manipulate, control their game, choose that target, and run with it. Now, as a supervisor, let's fix this camera a little bit. As a supervisor, it's not just about dealing with the employee. It's about correcting the employee's behavior. And in my opinion, now remember, guys, real quick, the reason why you have to address an employee that's problematic is because it kills employee morale. So whatever the concern is, I'm not too specific with the concern, but it's the employee morale that's going to lessen. So you have to make an effort to correct that. You have to make an effort to correct that problematic employee. So the first thing you have to understand is that you have to understand the perspective of the employee. Kind of ask you to be a little empathetic, not sympathetic. You're not going to put on the shoes and wear them. You're just going to understand what it's like to wear those shoes. But again, in no way it's going to influence what needs to be done. But you have to understand their perspective, because when you go to correct the behavior, you have to know where that problem originates from. And that's going to help guide you in how that behavior needs to be corrected. And again, this is more general, but take it as advice. It's so many specific concerns. But with that said, you can address them specifically, but you have to know where the concern originates. That's step one. Second thing is, make sure that each interaction that you have with that employee, that each effort you make to correct, it's documented somewhere. You got to realize that when you're dealing with these problematic employees, it could get to a point where you may have to remove them, or you may have to give them some other form of major discipline. At that point, you're really going to have to show that it's gotten to that point, that's progressed to that point. Remember, guys, we're working in jobs that, they really stress on the rights of the employee. You know, you want to make sure that you're fair in how you handle discipline. So you're going to have to exhaust all levels of attempts to correct the employee's behavior, and that has to be documented. Yeah, multiple times we try to do this, and the specific corrective action was this, and the person chose not to do that, and that was done on this date, this date, this date, and this date. Don't forget to document, because when it comes close to that person getting terminated, and it gets to the point where they could either be fired or given a major discipline, you have to prove that you've exhausted all effort, or you're back at step one. So that's another issue. So make sure that you document every interaction. Also, don't get emotional. Problematic employees can drain you. They can bring out the worst in the best of us. Don't let it get personal, because you can have an employee dead to rights, but if you make it personal, that employee is going to wind up pulling some form of discrimination, something, and you're going to wind up, as professional as it was, your interaction with the employee is now based on emotion, and that's going to play out somewhere. And even though you have this employee dead to rights, they're not going to focus on that. They're going to focus on that moment when you blew up. You know, that moment in how you treated that employee. So you have to be professional in all areas of dealing with that employee. Do not get emotional. Even if that means you need to take a breather for a second and come right back and address the issue, do that. But I will say one thing. Don't pass the issue off. You're a supervisor. You are responsible. This is one of the big parts of being that supervisor. So you have to step up. Give yourself a second to breathe. Come back and address the concern, but do not push it off to someone else. That's part of your responsibility as a supervisor, is to make the effort to correct it and to control those emotions, remain professional at all times. And it's one of the hardest things that you have to do as a supervisor. But again, step up. You have to get it done. Not a big fan of pushing it off to someone else. You have to address that concern. You have to solve that concern. Remember, you're responsible for that person's work. So if you don't make an action, whether it's what's needed or what you decide could work, you're going to be held responsible. So now you don't put an action on that employee, someone's going to put an action on you. So take that responsibility and correct that person's actions. But the one thing is not to allow it to fester, to destroy the employee morale. That's the problem. You have to really learn to address that immediately. So these are just some simple tips. It's something that I thought was worth mentioning, but I'm kind of not putting everything out there. I want to see what you guys give as well. Sometimes it's not about me providing everything. Sometimes I'd like to see what your perspective is. But on closing, I do want to add one more thing. Sometimes as a supervisor, you have that controlled pendulum swing where you have to be approachable, but you also have to have that respect where I may be approachable, I may come off as friendly, but when I have to wear that hat and I have to enforce discipline, I'm going to tell you, I'm going to enforce it. I'm zero tolerance for problematic employees who are messing with my environment. But that's a controlled pendulum. You know, after the moment passes and the person does what they're supposed to do, then you have to go back to the person you need to be, the person that you are. Because at the end of the day, you have to be always approachable, even for those employees that are highly problematic. Have the moment, deal with the moment, let the pendulum swing back to where it needs to be, and then continue the day. Don't let that moment carry out and destroy the morale with everybody else, but also specifically with that individual. That individual needs to know you're professional with it. This is the outcome. If they don't correct their behavior, this is what's going to happen. But at the end of the day, you're also here to, you know, I'm not turning myself off to you. I'm telling you I'm here if you need me. But at the end of the day, I'm also telling you I'm zero tolerance. And you have to kind of find that balance. That's where you have that controlled pendulum swing. You know, and again, it's a very tough role. There's nothing easy about being a supervisor. There's nothing easy, because you're going to have to kind of swing back and forth and always make an effort to keep that employee morale up. That, to me, is one of the keys of being a good supervisor. Keep that employee morale up. And sometimes when you have that problematic employee, you have to make all efforts to correct. But I would love your thoughts. Love to see if you can compliment what we have going on here. How would you deal with a problematic employee? Not just as a supervisor, as a peer. Have you ever worked with a problematic employee, and what was your ways of dealing with the employee? But the one answer I cannot accept is you cannot avoid them, not in corrections. You cannot isolate that employee. But I would love your thoughts. As always, guys, the show is Tier Talk. If you haven't, please subscribe, interact, engage, comment, hit that bell. That bell's going to notify you every time I post a video. Stay